line shift, Syrian NGOs can be perceived on having helped basically the enemy, the opposition, the terrorists. And this is a daily reality, our duty of care vis-a-vis the local actors in a conflict situation, and what can we do more. And also as lines shift, and this is a real conversation I had a few days ago before coming here, what happens if, what happened in East Aleppo, what may happen in Ghouta when lines shift, where the local actors, what would be the fate, how would they move? And these are really big challenges that we're still facing in conflict situation on the role of local actors.
Thank you. Dr. Nazila, how can we improve local solutions and local responses?
Thank you, Madame Alfioni. Yes, I think we have spoken about the positive role of local and national NGOs, and of course the point is absolutely well taken. But what about when the sensitivities and the culture has been divided? What about when there has been hatred and divide within the society? We are not going to come to a durable solution by being sensitive to that and by exacerbating that. So obviously we know that humanitarian actors should be careful and aware of those divides and act in a human rights friendly manner to that and in order to come to obvious solutions and not to feed into those divides and inequalities. And of course the humanitarian crisis situation itself offers the perfect fog for hate entrepreneurs to come in and interject and whip up greater prejudice and hatred. This was I came to a conference in Saudi Arabia in Jeddah at the OIC 3 years ago, and the exact challenge we were looking at was the incitement of religious hatred. So there are many divides, there are many hatreds, unfortunately, that might be fueling humanitarian crisis, but let me zone in on that and just give one example. There is a prisoner now in Yemen, Hamid bin Haydara, who's been imprisoned in Sana'a for over 4 years, and he has been mistreated in prison. He was sentenced last month to death. What was the reason? False charges were given, but the real reason was that he belongs to the Baha'i faith, because alongside his sentence, there was also a ban on all Baha'i activities. Now, we can also give examples from Muslims being mistreated and their rights violated, Christians, etc., etc. But this alerts us to the fact that hatred and prejudice finds...
So you're talking about these as challenges for
absolutely.
International organizations to intervene in
to
trying
be sensitive
to
that.
Local disasters.
Yes.
But who decides if this is a local disaster or not? If we take the Syrian crisis, for example, it's not a local crisis. It's a crisis that has affected the whole region.
Absolutely. And these prejudices and hatreds maybe have some existing roots, but it might be whipped up from outside and exacerbated from outside, making the conflict much more hard to resolve. So we must be cautious of incitement to religious hatred. We must be cautious, and I very much welcome 3 times or 4 times at the official opening yesterday, there was a reminder that aid should be given irrespective of nationality, other divisions, and irrespective of religion or belief. And this is really crucial as well. This is something that the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Religion or Belief drew attention to, Asma Jahangir, who sadly passed away 2 weeks ago. She drew attention to back in 2005, subsequent to the tsunami. Now, I want to also draw attention to some guidelines from the Faith for Rights initiative that was initiated by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights back in March 2007. The Beirut Declaration and the Beirut 18 Commitments draw our attention to the principles of conduct for the ICRC, for NGOs and disaster response programs. And this is that aid be given regardless of the recipient's creed and without adverse distinction of any kind, and that aid will not be used to further a particular religious standpoint. That's its commitment 14. Its commitment 15 says that we pledge neither to coerce people nor to exploit persons in vulnerable situations into converting from their religion or belief, while, and I think this is very important, while fully respecting everyone's freedom to have, adopt, or change a religion or belief and to manifest it in practice. I think the challenge of coexistence is a crucial one. It might have existed before the crisis. It might have been exacerbated by the crisis. Certainly, as humanitarian actors, this is not a sensibility we should take on board and lend support to. So the challenge of coexistence is something that we should be very aware of. It's a big challenge, but the risk of avoiding it is even greater.
Thank you, Doctor. Now, Mr. Al-Hajj, there's always this conflict of where does the aid go to? And especially in war zones, a big portion of the aid goes to the militias or the warlords. So, but on the side of this question, when is the right time for international organizations to step in? And who knows what's the best for the people? Who says that the UN should step in now? Who says that the ICRC has to be here? Who says that the government has to run the whole thing? Who says that the local agencies? Who decides all of this?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think your question already point out, to the complexity of the situations, where we all have to operate. And I don't know of any complex situation, where there will only be one line of response and then one line, of support and one area, that needs to be, supported. One has to, look at, first of all, what kind of access, do we have, to the people in need. Mm-hmm. And I think that is the most crucial point that we have. And sometimes we know where the needs are, and we know where, the support should go, and we don't have access to it.
Yes, that applies to wars and besieged areas.
Yeah,
specifically.
that's in the, because it constitutes, quite a lot of the crises, that we see. When we talk about also, natural disasters, unfortunately, even in the context of natural disasters, those places that are hardest to hit by the natural disasters, when the needs are greatest, they happen also to be situations, of conflicts of vulnerabilities. So the people face multiple deprivations, in that part, of the world. If you take, northern Nigeria, you have a drought, but then you have conflict. If you take the Lake Chad basin, first of all, it's a natural disaster, but also a conflict, going on at the same time. If you take, parts of Bangladesh where we are intervening because of a flood, then we have another disaster with 600,000 people, coming from Myanmar, on top of it. So the multiple entry points, will be critical. Now, what do we need in order to best identify the actors? We need a protection of the space, first of all, to intervene. And that space is shrinking, unfortunately, by the day. It's very sad to see that we pay a very high price of being local. We lost 66 friends, colleagues, and volunteers in Syria in the last 5 years, dying on the line of duty. We only 2 months in 2018, we already, lost 9 colleagues, working in the different parts, of the world. And that includes all the examples that have been mentioned, by the different colleagues, intervening here. So protection for local, for humanitarian space, to be safe and enabling will be critical, and the protection of those local actors in order to do their work. We welcome all the recommendation in terms of building more capacity, channeling more resources. But if the capacity and resources are there, and then still people will have to pay the ultimate price in order to respond to the needs, that may be defeat, the purpose. Now, again, to your question, multiple entry points, identifying, those that are trusted, by the communities, but at the same time, having the complementarity of the international actors, that, can complement, that work, and at the same time, having enough of a distance not to exacerbate, some of the dysfunctionalities and tensions, that may exist, as was proposed by my colleague before, I think would be one way to go.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Hajj. Dr. Sahaibani, what are the steps needed to empower localization in humanitarian aid?
شكرا جزيلا على هذا السؤال أستاذ نيفين. أن يطرح هذا الموضوع وأنا حقيقة قادم من المكتب قبل قليل، ففتحت جريدة الرياض اليوم فقط كأي جريدة، ووجدت فيها ما لا يقل عن حوالي 12 موضوعا يتحدث عن أزمة إنسانية. فلذلك جدير في الواقع أن نجعل العمل الإنساني في صميم الخطط الاستراتيجية للدول، أن نتجاوز المآسي الموجودة الآن فقط إلى أن ننقلها ونجعلها خطة استراتيجية لهذه الدولة أو تلك، سواء وطنا عربيا أو غيره. لماذا؟ لأنه حتى لو انتهت هذه الأزمة نحتاج إلى التنمية المستدامة، والتنمية المستدامة كما تعرفون هو لا بد أن نساعد كثر حالات الفقر إلى غير ذلك وانتشارها، أن نساعد الناس لكي يساعدوا أنفسهم. ولذلك أنا قلت لكم قبل قليل الزملاء في الهيئة العامة للمنظمة العربية للهلال الأحمر والصليب الأحمر تبنوا هذا الشعار من أن يكون العمل الإنساني نجدة وفزعة فحسب إلى أن يكون مهارة وصناعة واحتراف. من هنا حقيقة المنظمة بدعم الجمعيات الوطنية عملت على الانتقال من المحلية خلال الأيام الماضية والأشهر الماضية إلى الإقليمية، يعني التعاون البيني بين الجمعيات الوطنية يعني الحمد لله إلى حد كبير وإن كان لا يرضي قائم. على سبيل المثال اتفاقيات بين الهلال الأحمر البحريني والكويتي، الهلال الأحمر السعودي وغيره من اتفاقيات تعقد في هذا الجانب أو عقدت سابقا، ثم انتقلنا منها إلى الإقليمية بين منظمات العمل العربي المشترك التابعة لجامعة الدول العربية أو غيرها، من هذه الدائرة الصغيرة إلى الدائرة التي أكبر منها. ثم بعد ذلك، وهذا كان قبل شهر تقريبا مع الأمم المتحدة، وأنا أحيي منظمات الأمم المتحدة وجهودها الرائعة في الوطن العربي وفي كل مكان أيضا، لأن لديها حقيقة جهود كبيرة حتى يتحقق الانسجام والتنسيق، لأنه تجد هذه المنظمة أو تلك أو هذه الجمعية الوطنية أو تلك تعمل بنفس الميدان والإطار الذي تعمل فيه هذه المؤسسة أو غيره، وبالتالي لا بد أن نحقق هذا الانسجام والتكامل والتنسيق فيما بيننا. وأنا أقول قد ما نرى نحن الغرس بسرعة وقد ما نقطف الثمرة بين يوم وليلة، وبالتالي أقول علينا في هذه المناسبة أن نزرع البذرة وأن نغرس الشجرة، وقد يأتي غيرنا ليقطفها. وأؤكد هنا أيضا بأن الملابس الجميلة التي نلبسها نحن وإياكم جميعا وأنتم كذلك أيها الحضور الكريم قد ما يكون لها أثر بعد 2 أو 3 أو أكثر، وكذلك السيارات الفخمة التي جينا بها والكراسي الجميلة التي تجلسون عليها قد ما يكون لها فائدة بعد 5 سنوات أو أكثر وأقل، ولكن مثل تأصيل هذه الأعمال بلا شك، وأجزم أنكم تشاطروني الرأي، هي التي سيكون لها أكبر الأثر والنتيجة. من هنا أقول الخطوات كثيرة، لكن علينا أن نبدأ بأول، وهو التنسيق والتكامل بيننا وأن نرسم خططنا. لذلك نحن عملنا انطلاقا من الكلام الذي بدأت فيه مصفوفة نشاطات. مصفوفة نشاطات، ما هي النشاطات التي تقوم بها الجمعيات الوطنية العربية؟ وهنا أنا أحيي حقيقة الجمعيات التي بيننا بالذات من الدول العربية والخليجية على وجه خاص، جمعية الهلال الأحمر الكويتي، جمعية الهلال الأحمر البحريني، جمعية الهلال الأحمر هيئة الهلال الأحمر السعودي، كذلك جمعية الهلال أو هيئة الهلال الأحمر الإماراتي وغيرها من الجمعيات الحاضرين والمشاركين في هذا المعرض. وهذه فرصة ومنصة مثل هذه المعارض من ضمن الخطوات التي نلتقي فيها أيضا لنتعارف ونعقد اتفاقيات. فليس حضور مثل هذه المنتديات هو أن نتحدث فحسب، وإنما هناك أشياء تتم ما بين هذه اللقاءات إلى غيرها، إلى جانب هذا المعرض الذي قد يرى أنه مجرد توزيع صور أو عرض. هو في الواقع عندما أرى هذه النشاطات التي تنفذها اللجنة الدولية على سبيل المثال، وأجد حقيقة نفسي واجبا أثيرا لنفسي أداو بأن أشيد بجهود اللجنة الدولية ومكتبها بالذات النشط في الكويت الذي نجد منه كل تعاون مع المنظمة العربية ومع جمعياتنا الوطنية، وما إن نطلب منهم شيء إلا ويستجيبون فيه بسرعة. وهذه جزء من الخطوات وسرعة الاستجابة ما دام احنا في هذا الميدان. لا أنسى طبعا الاتحاد الدولي ونشاطه المشترك سواء منطقة المينا زون شمال أفريقيا والشرق الأوسط أو غيرها، ومنظمات المتحدة التي بيننا وبينهم تعاون أيضا قائم في هذا الميدان. لذلك الخطوات تقوم حقيقة متعددة، لكن علينا أن نبدأ. وأنا أقول فرصة ولعل تخرج توصية من هذه التوصيات لهذا المنتدى الرائع الذي يجب أن أكرر شكري الخالص لمركز الملك سلمان. هو فقط لا يقوم على الدعم وإنما أيضا انطلق إلى التأطير، وهذه نقطة يجب أن نشيد فيها وأن ينطلق منها أيضا ليكون مرجعا وقبلة للعالم في هذا الميدان، فهو قادر بما يملك من إمكانات ومن موارد بشرية. شكرا.
شكرا دكتور. I'm sorry, I'm running out of time for the session, so I want just brief answers. From now, we only have 5 minutes to close the session because there's another side event. Dr. Maalim, I know your passion is in localizing aid. So I'm going to ask you the same question. Obviously, you think there's a lot to be done to empower localization of aid. So what are the steps, in your opinion, that need to be implemented to empower localization of aid?
Thank you again, Divine. Fortunately, everybody on the podium is an expert, and basically we have the same. So far, from what I had, we have not really disagreed on anything as such. But some of the things have come up a little bit in a piecemeal kind of thing. I think we need 4 things in localization of aid that should also address the interventions by a local level machinery, a regional level machinery, or even a global level machinery. And one has been mentioned by the previous speaker is coordination. I think this is something that is easily said, but very hard to apply. Very, very important. Second thing is information. If we can harmonize information and trust each other's information because of having a systemic way of collecting information that then all applies to us, we'll do better. Thirdly is the issue of response, the appropriateness of response, the timeliness and issues like those is very important. And fourthly, and not the least, is the issue of research and policy issues that then can act as a machinery for exit strategy and linkages into development. I think those are the key things that we require to adhere to, but also local organization. Like in our case in the Horn of Africa, Kenya Red Cross is really an outstanding organization, and I agree the Red Cross and Federation representatives here are doing a very, very good job, and they link with our national institutions. So institutions like those to be capacity built and to be trusted with the responsibility of trying to use the auxiliary nature of the countries to perform is also important.
Thank you. My last 2 questions. The first one goes to Mr. Panos. Sometimes the needs are shifted between what the needs are for the locals and what the priorities are for those organizations. Do you agree on this?
This is a huge question and a very important one. If you think on our work, we bend backwards to be accountable to our donors, to satisfy them, to give them reports, to brief them, to fly to capitals. We do not do anywhere near enough to really be close to and accountable to the people. Accountability to affected people is vital. In places where we have done it well, what a difference it has made in terms of the programming, in terms of the results, in terms of the quality for what we do. Do we have a relation of dignity and respect towards the very people we're there for? Do we give it enough attention? Many organizations, I think over the last few years, we have improved our accountability to affected people, communicating with communities, engaging, participating, but there is still an area where there's a lot more to be done. And what I find it very difficult is when we have a mega operation like Syria, you know, more than 200 actors, how do we make sure, and that's a question we ask ourselves at the leadership level, that we take into account the people's wishes, desires, complaints, grievances, when we say the strategic direction is 1, 2, 3, have we heard enough to the people? Certainly we can do a lot better to that. So really our effort should be in every possible way to ensure a better accountability to the needs of the people, and the local actors are by far the best placed to be able to understand and to convey and bring this voice to the leadership and the direction that we all take.
Thank you. Mr. Gilles, what is more important, the role of the private sector in boosting localization or the role of the government?
They are complementary, and the role of the private sector is rising, including not only multinational companies, but domestic, small and medium-sized enterprise, and it is important and growing. Yet, thank you for raising the government. I think when we speak of effective localization, we have spoken a lot about assistance, but we need to think about how to get to a greater localization in terms of preventing violations of international humanitarian law and protecting people. And we do our utmost to train in over 90 countries, to train armed forces, security forces, the judiciary in first embedding international humanitarian law in domestic legislation, and government have a key role then to implement their commitment under the Geneva Conventions. And we also do our utmost to train concretely security forces and armed forces, the military, in terms of what it means concretely in combat. And more of this must be done. We continue to also work with the judiciary to help penitentiary and prison authorities to improve conditions of detentions and provide proper treatment for detainees. And this is really the core of what we think is important in the localization debate with regard to governance. And maybe a final word to echo also my co-panelist, Al-Hajj Assi and Dr. Saleh. We think also that it's important to continue building not only the capacities in terms of expertise, but even the organizational capacity and institutions of local organizations. So we have, together with the International Federation, we have set up, for instance, an alliance, a National Society Alliance investment fund with the idea to provide multi-year funding in order to invest really in capacities of national and local chapters, which are at the forefront of the response.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gilles. I want to thank all my guests today. I know that we need hours and hours to talk about this. This is the most debated topic in humanitarian aid, but we're running out of time. And I apologize, I cannot take questions from the audience. I want to thank you all, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. And I want to invite you to the side event that is starting now in a few minutes on local organizations, the capacity building and empowerment. Thank you so much and have a very nice rest of the day. Thank you. Shukran. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, yes, but very quick, please.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. محمد حج العنزي، محامي سعودي وعضو الرابطة العربية للثقافة والفكر والأدب في دبي، ومعد برامج ثقافية ودينية بتلفزيون دولة الكويت. أشكر مولاي خادم الحرمين الشريفين الملك سلمان على رعاية هذا المنتدى الكبير، وأشكر المنظمين مركز الملك سلمان للإغاثة والأعمال الإنسانية، معالي المستشار بالديوان الملكي المشرف العام على المركز الدكتور عبد الله بن عبد العزيز الربيع والأخوة المنظمين، وأشكر المحاضرين جميعا.
دكتور
هناك خبرات للأفراد
لو سمحت
أو خبرات العاملين في المنظمات.
أستاذ لو سمحت بدي تسامحني معلش، لأنه الأورجنايزرز عم بيطلبوا مني إنه لازم سكر السيشن لأنه الجلسة الثانية بلشت. فاسمح لي إذا بتحب توجه سؤالك لأي حدا من الضيوف ممكن توجهه.
أنا جايب السؤال لو سمحت.
لازم سكر الجلسة، بعتذر كثير منك.
أعتقد هناك سؤال أو شيء. أشكر الأستاذة مدام نيفين رئيسة الجلسة والمحاضرون. سؤال الأستاذ الحاج مادوسن والسفير محبوب والدكتور بنسون. هناك خبرات الأفراد أو خبرات العاملين في المنظمات العاملة في المجال الإنساني ليست كافية، وتغيير القيم وإيجاد الحلول والتحديات التي تعيق العمل الإنساني ليست كافية، ويجب إشراك العلماء والجامعات والمؤسسات الدينية المعنية والعدلية في التعاون في وضع الخطط الاستراتيجية لهذه المساعدات ومحاربة الثالوث وهو الجهل والمرض.
أنا لازم سكر الجلسة لأنه في جلسة ثانية بلشت، بعتذر منها كثير.
من حق الحاضرين أعتقد أنهم يسألوا يعني. شكرا.
طبعا أي حدا من الضيوف مستعد إنه يحكي معك، بس لازم سكرها. شكرا كثير لك.
I've got something very important to share with you. In fact, it is this time of the day where we say, Ahlan wa sahlan, wa shukran, wa ma salama kaman. Because it is almost time, because it is almost time to conclude this wonderful, wonderful initiative, the very first inaugural Riyadh International Humanitarian Forum. But before we do, ladies and gentlemen, what is very important, al-muhim, we need to give you takeaways that we have agreed upon here so that we can turn theory into implementation, so that we can turn opinion into consensus, so that we can take what has been discussed and start creating new facts on the ground in support of humanitarian action. What I have in front of me, ladies and gentlemen, is a list of all that has been agreed over these 2 days. And what I'm going to do is, I am going to read these points for you, and if you want, you can take your notes. We will put this up on the website later, inshallah, but you can take your notes. I will read this out verbatim, because the language here has been decided not in isolation, but in discussion and debate from humanitarian organizations and individuals and governments from all over the world. I just want to be able to tell you that what we want to do with this, what KS Relief and the Riyadh International Humanitarian Forum want to do, is for all of us to take these and use these to create meaningful, relevant, and practical advances in the international humanitarian field. Now, I also want to tell you, and it's here in my notes, and this is an amazing statistic. Over the last 2 days, ladies and gentlemen, we have had approximately 1,500 participants in this forum. I think that's an amazing figure. 1,500. How about we give a round of applause for that figure? I think that's amazing. 1,500 people. Look, I really love you guys. Like, أنا أحب جمهور هون بس, but that was a very bad round of applause. We need to do better. Let's give this a proper round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Mashkoor, you're lovely. You're lovely. 1,500 participants, ladies and gentlemen. And they came from 80 national, regional, and international humanitarian organizations. 80 organizations. And we held about 20 high-level discussions and side events, apart from the action that you've seen on the main stage. So yalla, now I'm going to get to the recommendations. There are, on this piece of paper, 14 points, and they're divided into, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 themes. 14 points over 4 themes. Let me give you what has been debated and agreed upon here. So under theme 1, and I'm sorry to do this, but I'm going to read this verbatim because I need the words to be exactly as they are. Theme 1, humanitarian assistance. So as a result of this forum, what the August participants of this forum, they've decided to seek long-term solutions to conflicts to alleviate the continued suffering of millions of people living in conflict areas. Number 2, to urge all political actors to respect human rights, humanitarian principles, and to provide unimpeded access for all humanitarian aid providers so that life-saving assistance can be delivered. Support measures for more inclusive humanitarian coordination mechanisms. This is point number 3. Support measures for more inclusive humanitarian coordination mechanisms, including non-traditional donors, regional organizations, and local actors. 4. Emphasize the need to bridge the current humanitarian and development gap, so the gap between humanitarian and development assistance, through a focus on strengthening conceptual and practical institutional linkages between humanitarian assistance and development. So this is the conclusion of theme 1, humanitarian assistance. Our point number 5, so we've done 4, point number 5, theme 2. So this falls under theme 2 now. Humanitarian financing and capacities. In this, I'm just going to continue with that number. No, actually, I'm going to give you a new numbering. Point 1 in this theme is to support long-term approaches to humanitarian needs through multi-year funding that promotes sustainable impact across the humanitarian development nexus. So once again, we're looking at humanitarian aid and development aid and the nexus. And then to encourage all donors to actively use financial tracking service, otherwise known as FTS, to register their contributions, which will ensure transparency and will also help decision makers better allocate resources. And the third and final point in theme 2, which is humanitarian financing and capacities, is this: adapt a more gender inclusive policy to empower more women to contribute in the humanitarian field. I mean, honestly, it's been a privilege and a pleasure to see the vast number of women who have actively participated in this August gathering. But as this point says, this gender-inclusive policy needs to be reflected on the field and in the offices of policy making as well. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you're keeping count, we are now at theme Thalata. So this is our third theme, which is innovation and reform in the humanitarian sector. Within of this, I have 3 points for you again. Number 1, invest globally in innovative approaches and support research initiatives to tackle the growing humanitarian challenge and ensure efficient and effective humanitarian responses. Number 2, commit to strengthening resilience and global preparedness to prevent the breakdown of livelihood, as well as improve the quality of life, deliver rapid and fast responses, and eventually reduce the levels of humanitarian needs over time. Your last point in this theme, point number 4, is to encourage innovations from the public and private sector in aid delivery mechanisms. Support the introduction of new approaches that can reduce operational costs while also increasing effectiveness. Ladies and gentlemen, how many themes have we done? Anybody know? 3, mashallah, you're listening, good. We've done 3 themes. This is theme number 4, the final theme, and this has 4 points for us to consider in our conclusions, in our agreements, and in our final recommendations. So let us start then. Point number 1. So the theme is, theme 4, localization of aid. And the reason, of course, has been discussed here. Aid needs to be relevant, topical, and localized. So, number 1, prioritize humanitarian local context awareness. And include in this awareness existing systems of resilience so that we can address the actual needs of crisis-affected communities. Number 2, recognize and respect the perspectives and knowledge of local communities on how to effectively design and deliver humanitarian aid within these communities. Number 3, enhance local response capacities by increasing financial and technical support to first responders. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, promote humanitarian action via harmonious approaches, bringing to the table local, national, and international actors. So there we go, 4 themes, 14 final recommendations from this 2-day conference. I think they're very robust. I also think they're actionable. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I think that these recommendations deserve a round of applause. So please join me in one final round of applause. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to end by reminding you that there is a final session on creating a definitive humanitarian plan for Yemen, which is a very important topic. Specifically because we are involved in the country and have been involved from a humanitarian angle and from a security angle. This is taking place, I think, in Hall C, and it is happening at 4, so in 10 minutes. Please be there for that, because again, the idea is to give you an actionable plan and actually use our combined expertise to create to create a blueprint for humanitarian assistance that will hopefully alleviate, if not solve, the Yemen humanitarian crisis. Now, ladies and gentlemen, there's one last thing I want to say. It was a privilege and a pleasure visiting you here in Riyadh. You have been wonderful as people and as an audience. Can I ask you to give yourselves a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen? You've been beautiful. You have made these past 2 days just wonderful. It was a privilege and a pleasure to be part of the first Riyadh International Humanitarian Forum. Now, I'm going to be heading back to Dubai tonight, but with very fond memories of this forum, of you people, and of Riyadh. Thank you very much. Enjoy your final Yemen session, and inshallah, shufkom next year. Ma salama.
ايوه تعال بقى على الستيج على الستيج عشان لا لازم عشان اطلعها في نيويورك تايمز. طب بص يا مولانا
هذا الدكتور محمد الشريف اكتبها في
انا ان شاء الله
بارك الله فيك
استاذنا الغالي هطلعها لك في الاهرام. ايه رايك بقى؟ نائب هكلمك على حبايبي